Hi, kids. Okay, so we left yesterday with them, the Ingalls family, all just scared to death, actually petrified, because they kept hearing the Indian war cry all night. And in fact, an Indian came and rode past their house in the middle of the night on the Indian pony, the little black Indian pony. So they have no idea what is going on. But by morning, it was all silent. So here we start again. The next day, they could not go out of the house. Pa stayed close by. There was not one sound from the Indian camps. The whole vast prairie was still. Only the wind blew over the blackened earth where there was no grass to rustle. The wind blew past the house with a rushing sound like running water. That night, the noise in the Indian camps was worse than the night before. Again and again, the war cries were more terrible than the most dreadful nightmare. Laurie and Mary huddled close against Ma. Poor little baby Carrie cried, and Pa watched at the window with his gun. And all night long, Jack paced and growled and screamed when the war cries came. The next and the next night and the next night were worse and worse. Mary and Laura were so tired that they fell asleep while the drums pounded and the Indians yelled, but a war cry always jerked them wide awake in terror. And the silent days were even worse than the nights. Pa watched and listened all the time. The plow was in the field where he had left it. Pet and Patty and the colt and the cow and the calf stayed in the barn. Mary and Laura could not go out of the house. And Pa never stopped looking at the prairie all around and turning his head quickly toward the smallest noise. He ate hardly any dinner. He kept getting up and going outdoors to look all around at the prairie. One day, his head nodded down to the table and he slept there. Mary and Ma and Laura were still to let him sleep. He was so tired, but in a minute he woke up with a jump and said sharply to Ma, "Don't let me do that again." "Jack was on guard," Ma said gently. That night was worst of all. The drums were faster and the yells were louder and fiercer. All up and down the creek, war cries answered war cries and the bluffs echoed. There was no rest. Laura ached all over and there was a terrible ache in her very middle. Look at this picture. At the window, Pa said, "Caroline, they are quarreling among themselves. Maybe they will fight each other." "Oh, Charles, if only they will," Ma said. All night there was not a minute's rest. Just before dawn, a last war cry ended and Laura slept against Ma's knee. She woke up in bed. Mary was sleeping beside her. The door was open, and by the sunshine on the floor, Laura knew it was almost noon. Ma was cooking dinner, and Pa sat on the doorstep. He said to Ma, "There's another big party going off to the south." Laura went to the door in her nightgown, and she saw a long line of Indians far away. The line came up out of the black prairie, and it went farther away southward. The Indians on their ponies were so small in the distance that they looked not much bigger than ants. Pa said that 2 big parties of Indians had gone west that morning. Now this one was going south. It meant that the Indians had quarreled among themselves. They were going away from their camps in the creek bottoms. They would not all go together to their big buffalo hunt. That night, the darkness came quietly. There was no sound except the rushing of the wind. "Tonight we'll sleep," Pa said, and they did. All night long, they did not even dream. And in the morning, Jack was still sleeping limp and flat on the same spot where he'd been sleeping when Laura went to bed. The next day was still too, and again, they all slept soundly. That morning, Pa said he felt as fresh as a daisy, and he was going to do a little scouting along the creek. He chained Jack to the ring in the house wall, and he took his gun and went out of sight down the creek road. Laura and Mary and Ma could not do anything but wait until he came back. They stayed in the house and wished he would come. The sunshine had never moved so slowly on the floor as it did on that day. But he did come back. Late in the afternoon he came, and everything was all right. He had gone up far and down the creek and had seen many deserted Indian camps. All the Indians had gone, except a tribe called the Osages. In the woods, Pa had met an Osage who could talk to him. The Indian told him that all the tribes except the Osages had made up their minds to kill the white people who had come to Indian country. And they were getting ready to do it when the lone Indian came riding into their big powwow. The Indian had come riding so far and fast because he did not want them to kill the white people. He was an Osage, and they called him a name that meant he was a great soldier. Soldat Duchesne, Pa said his name was. He kept arguing with them day and night. Pa said till all the other Osages agreed with him. Then he stood up and told the other tribes that if they started to massacre us, the Osages would fight them. And massacre means killed. That was what had made so much noise that last terrible night. The other tribes were howling at the Osages, and the Osages were howling back at them. The other tribes did not dare fight Soldat Duchesne and all his Osages, so the next day they went away. That's one good Indian, Pa said. No matter what Mr. Scott said, Pa did not believe that the only good Indian was a dead Indian. First grade, that is some stressful times for the Ingalls family. Can you imagine? And the name of the next chapter is called Indians Ride Away. Let me see how long this chapter is. I don't think I'm going to start it today because we're almost done with the book. We have 2 more chapters, but I don't want to start it today. Yeah, we're almost done with the book. I will read the next chapter when I see you again. Okay, bye-bye.